sometimes it's not all just farming stuff that's got to go on. Sometimes it's some of the homesteading stuff. We really needed to cut some rhubarb, and some of the leaves were just looking all tattered like this, but the stalks are just fine. So I was out and picked up some strawberries. So we're going to make some strawberry rhubarb jam. I just go over and give the cows some water and saw that I needed to do some rhubarb. I picked up the strawberries yesterday, so we're making farm fresh homemade jam. And I just keep things on hand for it. So I can use the honey or the maple syrup for the sugar, and occasionally I'll buy like a 25-pound bag of sugar and use that. The different sugars kind of react differently with the pectin in the jam, and I tend to do my jams and jellies in very large batches, which isn't super recommended because it can affect the gelling or the setup. So sometimes it needs a little extra cook time. No big deal. But I just try to pick it. It grows out in full sun. Find a nice shady spot or take it in the house. I like to take the leaves off while I'm outside, because there's always some little spiders and bugs in them. And just like everything else on the farm, we're growing it organic. So I'd rather keep the little critters outside. This is more rhubarb than my babies weighed when they were born. A bit more than I need, I think, for making jam. So we'll run it all through the food processor, put it in bags, and store it in the freezer. That way I can just pull something out for a quick dessert like rhubarb crisp any night. Alright, so now I am switching attachments so that I can slice my rhubarb. And if you're wondering, this is a Cuisinart food processor, and I had picked this up a few years ago. So I'll link in the description whatever model is closest to this. But this is really nice because I was able to get this accessory drawer with it. And it stores all of my chopping and dicing blades right in here. So this is my shredding blade. And then I've got 3 chopping blades that came with it. This one is a dough blade. And then this is the chopping blade that I use for the strawberries. So we're making our strawberry rhubarb jam today. And I believe I'm going to do this freezer jam style for time saving. So I will link in the description the food pack saving containers that I'm going to use, and I'm going to get on with chopping up some rhubarb now. That sure beats chopping up 12 cups full of rhubarb by hand. And that was the reason I bought this. Okay, we've got another batch of strawberries run through the food processor on top of the rhubarb. I like to layer in the pot. We're gonna warm this up on high. Some people like to do this where you add the sugar and it brings out the moisture. That's more for doing desserts than for doing jams. So when you're cooking the jam, they recommend adding your lemon juice, your fruit, and your pectin. Bring it to a boil for 1 minute and then add the pectin. So the basic recipe for this in a small batch is 2 cups of rhubarb, 2 cups of strawberries, 1 package of powdered pectin, and 1/4 cup of lemon juice. Now total, it calls for about 5.5 cups of sugar. That's a lot for me, but it does need the sugar for setting up the pectin. And if you like, you can substitute your honey or your maple syrup, but your results can be unpredictable. So just keep that in mind. Whatever in a kitchen is a fail or doesn't quite work out for my jam and my jelly, it all becomes sauce for on top of desserts, like our homemade vanilla ice cream. So today I'm using the Ball Classic Fruit Pectin, and again, I'll put a link for this in the description. So we're gonna go ahead and stir this in, and I know I am doing a great big batch here. Keep in mind for your measurements, your food processor can help you keep track of how many cups of fruit you're chopping, because if you're doing it by hand, that can be a hard thing to kind of determine how many cups you're actually using, and that's been trouble for me in the past. So being that the food processor is 12 cups, it just keeps track for me. So the pectin, see all this liquid that's coming out from sitting in here? Now some of it's lemon juice, and the lemon juice is acting as your citric acid. So I'm stirring in the pectin, it's warming up to a boil. This way, adding a little bit at a time, I'm getting that pectin thoroughly distributed. And how do you like my new pot? This is what prompted me to make the homemade jam. It's so beautiful. It's this soft baby blue. I just love it. I love colored pots in the kitchen whenever I can have them. And this new line of enamelware that has caught on in the last couple of years, it's just so pretty. Now, after this has come to a boil, we add our sugar. And remember, it was 5.5 cups sugar for the 4 cups of fruit. So just multiply out for however many batches you're making at once. Now, I will tell you this recipe is supposed to make 6 half pints. This is a nice half pint jar from Ball. And if you want to give these as gifts during the holidays, you can cover the top with a little bit of cut fabric square. It's really pretty with a little bit of a raffia string or just some colored string for any time of year. I've seen people sell their jams and jellies at roadside stands. Just keep in mind that if you're going to can it, they recommend that you use a fresh lid every time, and you can reuse your bands. Actually, after it's done processing, you can take the bands off and store them in the pantry without the bands. They recommend now to not store your bands on your jars because then if it is a bad seal, you don't know it. Okay, we are stirring in our sugar now. And remember, that was 5.5 cups for the 4 cups of fruit. If you're following the recipe, just double it or multiply it as needed for however big your batch is. I'm going to get a little bit more sugar here, and I'm going to show you a little trick that I do. I buy sugar in a 25-pound bag, and I store it in a 5-gallon bucket with what's called a gamma lid. Instead of a snap-on lid, you put the snap-on ring on it and it screws on. We also picked up these Mylar food bags, and I put a little bit of DE or diatomaceous earth in the bottom of the bucket before the bag, and it keeps any pests or insects out of it. My husband actually cut the label off of the bag and taped it on here for me because we buy a lot of stuff this way. And I keep a mason jar in here because I know this is 2 cups. So I just bring it up when I'm doing a batch. Right, it's nice to play in, but it's not sand, is it? Little guy here is almost 2. Yes, and he loves to have jelly on his toast and on his peanut butter and jellies, don't you? So I just close up that Mylar bag, and here is my gamma lid. I always mark on my lid when we last bought the sugar and what is in the bucket as well, in case I can't see the label on the side. Okay, so now with our sugar, finishing, dissolving, mixing in, it's got to cook hard for 1 minute. Boil hard, it says, 1 minute. This is a opportunity for you to skim any foam off of the top. It doesn't look so nice in the jars. It doesn't hurt anything. If you want it to look nice, it's just a good idea to skim it off. All right, our jam is all complete now. We let it boil. I skimmed it. Watch for the bottom of your pot while you're working. I had a little bit of a hot spot, and I was using that rubber spatula. It wasn't getting to the bottom of my pot to stir real well. If you have a deep pot like this, a lot of the things aren't quite long enough to reach down there. You want to make sure that you have something. I stopped by Gordon's Food Services a couple of years ago, and you can get commercial grade utensils for your kitchen for these big canning jobs. Now I just fill these to about a 1/2 inch from the top. I'll label it with freezer tape. And I've been collecting these containers over the years, so it can be tricky buying them that way for matching up your lids. So if you can, try to buy them all at once so that your lids interchange. I try to go from the bottom of the pot so that I get a good mix of rhubarb and juice. Now, if I was doing this in mason jars, I prefer to can them for our family in 1 pints because we go through a pint every few days. So this method of freezer packing it isn't a true freezer jam because I'm cooking it. They actually make a freezer jam pectin, and I actually saw a Mrs. Wage's freezer jam no cook pectin the other day, and they were marked down on clearance. If you're near a Tractor Supply at all, make sure you check the use by date. So this is all of our fresh homemade strawberry rhubarb jam, everybody. Thanks for watching. I hope some of these methods of making homemade jam help you out in your harvest and your bounty. to enjoy in the cold winter months. Thanks for watching, everybody. Bye-bye.